South Africa's tough new entry rules to prevent child trafficking came into effect today. Airlines and travel agents have been warning about the impact for weeks, and the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry said this morning that the new rules are like economic suicide. Now, it's estimated that 30,000 children are trafficked into South Africa annually, often for prostitution or child labour purposes, and government wants to curb that flow. The regulations require minor children to carry an unabridged birth certificate when travelling to or from the country. From today, those travelling with minor children will be required to produce an unabridged birth certificate bearing the names of both parents. The South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry says the tourism industry, which contributes about 9% to GDP, will be very hard hit, and we could see more job losses. Travel agents have indicated that they are already experiencing cancellations of pre-planned trips. Well, joining us on the line now is Peggy Drodskie, Acting CEO at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Good evening to you, Peggy. Have you spoken out before? Has SACI been concerned about this for some time? And just extrapolate how this is economic suicide if we stick to these regulations.
We have actually been concerned about these proposed regulations ever since they were introduced towards the middle of last year. And on several occasions, we actually requested meetings with the Department of Home Affairs, and were not successful in getting those meetings. And ever since, we have spoken about it and tried to get the news through to them that what they have been proposing is certainly not going to get the results that they are hoping for. I think everybody is aware that child trafficking is a serious issue in South Africa and globally as well. But the way in which they are trying to address it is certainly not going to achieve those results. South Africa has got very, very porous borders, and it's easy to cross the borders without going through normal admission requirements.
Peggy, apparently we've been hearing a lot of Indian trips have been cancelled. Apparently India does not even issue unabridged birth certificates. So it does seem strange that a law was implemented that could halt travel from India. Is it that serious?
Yes, it is. There are other countries that don't issue unabridged certificates. They issue a certificate, and in South Africa, you get a separate certificate, which is a birth certificate, but the unabridged one has got far more detail in it. And another part of the problem is that the requirement is that this certificate has to be in English. Now, if you are in India, using that as an example, and you're not an English-speaking person, how are you going to ever get that certificate in English in time for you to travel? And it's also quite costly.
On Friday, Peggy, I was at a briefing actually about the World Economic Forum, but Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, was there. He basically told journalists that these laws will be reviewed. So obviously after the fact, government still allowed them to come into effect today. But this review, have you heard about it? Does that appease you?
Well, we also heard that there was going to be a review, and in fact, if I recall correctly, but I stand under correction, it was either in the budget speech or it was in the State of the Nation address that the President gave, that the undertaking was given that there would be a review of these particular requirements. And since then, it's been very, very quiet. We haven't heard anything. And we've been waiting in anticipation for the review, but it just hasn't materialized.
In the meantime, are you concerned, what sort of damage are we looking at in finality?
Well, there is, of course, the reputational damage that South Africa is again introducing legislation which is making it more difficult for people to access the country. But we've also had reports that there have been people who have booked trips to South Africa and they have cancelled them because of this requirement. We have been told that the requirement that the certificate has to be in English, to try and get one of those in China, for instance, will cost the equivalent of 1,000 rand per certificate. And if you're bringing 3 children with you, that's an additional 3,000 rand to the cost of your trip. And that is just enough to make people say, well, the effort of going to get this translated, the effort of getting an accredited translator to do it, the cost and the time taken just does not make that trip to South Africa worthwhile. So we'll rather go somewhere else.
Peggy, I said in finality, but let me just throw this last thing at you, because we have spoken to the minister involved, and he's been adamant that we have to protect children. If we can protect just a few little ones from child trafficking, is this damage worth it?
You know, we are pretty certain that what has happened is that the people who would be bringing children with them in a legitimate fashion will comply. The ones that were bringing the children in illegally are the ones that are going to find some other way of getting them into South Africa. We have got very porous borders, and people can cross over from our neighboring states into South Africa from areas which are nowhere near any of the border posts. You can cross over from Zimbabwe, you can cross over from Botswana, you can cross over from Swaziland